manage expectations. Those artists and collectors alike who manage their expectations have a higher chance of longevity within
Mhm.
Web3. I think that is so important because in 2021 it created a lot of false expectations of what could be. And artists quit their job, they risked a lot,
Mm.
and then ended up with minimal of that in 2022 and 2023 because they over leveraged themselves.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today's guest is Rob, who also goes by the name RDToTheMoon. And Rob has a lot of experience when it comes to dealing with artists and collectors. He has worked at Nifty Gateway, Rodeo, Foundation, and currently works at MakersPlace. He's an advisor and share amazing feedback, advice, and context for both artists and collectors in the digital art space. Thanks again for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter and podcast. Rob, excited to have you here. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Doing great, doing great. It's December. We're closing the year. I think the episode will air in January.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just for people listening, we are recording this the last week of December, close to the last week of December. But yeah, very excited to have you on the show, Rob. I've been following you for a while. We met in Paris, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you have done so many things when it comes to digital art. Have a lot of experience working with artists, collectors, marketplaces. So
Yep.
yeah, very interested in your journey. Rob, can you tell us a bit about your beginnings? So how did you join crypto and digital art? When did you discover it?
Yeah. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. For me, my journey started around December of 2020. At that point in time, I was working in college football, doing graphic design and working in recruiting. There's a really good friend of mine who was a graphic designer, and on Twitter, he started tweeting about NFTs. Um, and I had no idea what it was. But what stood out to me is that, particularly when he would tweet about NFTs, people were giving him, flack for it. And when normally, anytime he shared any of his graphics, his design, I mean, there's high interactions and engagement with his tweets. And so that intrigued me. And so I started to research a little bit because that was near the end of the year for us during the football season. So that's where my focus was. But I started to dive into NFTs a little bit more. And I remember doing research on it. And then the fact that artists could be paid past the initial transaction just completely blew my mind. Just having friends that are artists,
Mhm.
and then the fact that it was easily, like traceable back, sort of the transaction process, on chain. So that just completely blew my mind. And then after the season, once things started winding down, I started to do a little bit more research. So around like March of 2021. I remember coming across OpenSea, Super Rare, Rarible, Nifty Gateway, and um, at that point in time, I didn't necessarily, wasn't too versed in like MetaMask and crypto wallets, and so it was a distant like concept to me, and I wasn't too sure about going at that rabbit hole. And I remember seeing Nifty Gateway, and visually, I thought the site looked legit, because I also had some experience with like eBay and buying and selling on eBay, and sometimes you saw certain things that just looked like knockoff and fakes, and so visually, you can tell when a site is like legit in comparison to something else. So I remember seeing Nifty Gateway and thought, okay, this looks decent. Like it looks good. It looks legit. And I remember purchasing the first piece, which was by Jonathan Thunder. I think it was called "Kill the Wabbit," and that was March of 2021. And I remember putting my credit card in information and thinking, okay, well, if this is complete scam, like this is fake, at least I can just cancel,
Yeah.
call my company and cancel it. So all hope is not lost there. So I did it, and I remember like stalking my bank statement for like the next 2 days, and nothing happened. So I was like, okay, I guess this is legit. And so I remember joining the Nifty Gateway Discord in April of 2021, and then I started to become more present in the
Mhm.
community. I would constantly go in there, talk about different artists with community members, and I just became fascinated with wanting to learn more about each artist that was releasing on Nifty Gateway and doing curated releases. And so I did that for about, I don't know, like 8 months or so, or sorry, like six months, and then eventually I was lucky enough to be hired full time
Mm,
at Nifty Gateway. December of 2021, December 6th, 2021 was my first day at Nifty Gateway. So that was kind of
nice.
like my transition from sort of my Web 2 background and world, into Web 3. So I was very, very lucky. Like I couldn't even believe when I got hired that I was working in Web 3 because all I knew was college football.
How long were you doing? So were you working on college football?
Yeah, so around 4 years. My degree is in sport management. My background is in sport management. Always loved art, and so upon graduating, I started working with a junior college, and at that point in time, they needed someone to do graphics because recruiting, the recruits loved graphics. They loved seeing themselves in the school's jersey and
Ah,
all these different graphics and their name on the jersey and their name in different places. So at that point in time, college graphics in college football was like blowing up as a serious career path. And so I've always loved art. I taught myself Photoshop and I started to become really, really good at it. And from there, I made the jump from a junior college to Michigan State. That's huge. It takes about people like if I strictly just went coaching, it would have taken me, I don't know, like 5+ years to make such leap. And I was able to do that within about a year and a half because I was able to leverage that my ability to know Photoshop and do graphics. So for Michigan State, I spent the season there, went to Bowling Green State University football in 2019, where I was a recruiting and graphic design assistant. There, I really started to hone my skill doing graphic design, and I became really, really good at it. Um, there was a specific Twitter page that was tailored to, just all the graphics in college sports, and I would get constant shout outs there for my graphics.
nice.
And then from there, I took a role at Army West Point football in 2020, where I was hired as the director of content marketing and recruiting assistant. So again, doing graphics and leading our initiatives for graphics there. Had a couple of interns working under me, and also assisted in recruiting as well. And a little nugget I like to throw out there, and this little, this like fun fact blows my mind because I didn't have the art or design background, but I actually designed the truck wrap on the
Mm,
Army football team equipment truck, which is a huge deal. It's a very huge deal. If you're familiar with like the Hess trucks that happen, sort of like through the holidays, through Christmas time, where people collect them and people are
mm,
familiar with the different designs. Sort of the Army truck, it's like the face of the team whenever the truck goes around the country. It's something that's very prideful.
mm,
So I designed a truck wrap for that year, and it still blows my mind because I remember as I'm designing it, I was so stressed for like, that whole month because not only are you designing it for the military, for the United States Military Academy, but it represents so much more. And I've never designed a graphic for that scale. So there were a
yeah.
lot of challenges that I didn't consider. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not a graphic designer,
Yeah, yeah.
by trade, but I've always loved art. And that's where I wanted to add value. And yeah, it was a great experience. So that's kind of been like my journey from my Web 2 world and a little bit of my background and now
And
into Web 3.
what was your job at Nifty Gateway? What were you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Nifty Gateway, at that point in time, Nifty Gateway, was thinking like, you can't necessarily collect collections beyond what we released.
Mm,
And they were thinking we really wanted to be the gateway to Web 3 for non Web 3 users. So they thought, hey, why not offer collections art that's outside of our that's native to Nifty Gateway. So I was part of the market operations team, essentially a marketplace operation associate, whose daily job was to look for projects, collection art, that we could bring on to
mm,
Nifty Gateway so that people can easily purchase it, with fiat. So I was part of the team that led Nifty Gateway through their external marketplace expansion. Did that for a couple of months, was promoted. And we had, we definitely had a lot of success. A lot of challenges came with that too. Yeah, and it was a great time.
Were there parallels, Rob, from recruiting college athletes and then I don't think it's the right word, recruiting artists, but basically scouting, right? Scouting artists.
There's a lot of parallels to be honest. I think someone said to me a couple of months ago, you went from recruiting and scouting, players and
Yeah.
athletes to like, working and scouting and looking for potential, artists to work with as well. And really, yeah, there's a ton of parallel there, but I think for me, what makes it make sense is just I think I just truly enjoy seeing the potential in people
Mm.
and helping them in the development of their potential. I think for me, that is the through line that I've enjoyed in recruiting and also enjoyed in the roles that I've been in Web3.
Yeah, no, that's exciting, especially in this space, which is kind of a. I mean, we are still early; it's the first years, and there are so many. Yeah, we could say players, right? From when you think about even products, companies, talent, creators, and there is so much potential there. So I
Yeah,
think it's a great place to be if you understand that's what you enjoy and what you like, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think it's something that comes just from my personal upbringing. Um, and I wouldn't say lack of resources, but something that I wanted.
Mm,
Part of the reason why I wanted to go into, sports and coaching is because I wanted to be that mentor. I wanted to be that guiding light, sort of that resource for someone so that they can take it beyond,
mm,
their reality. And I think for me, that's the place that I come from. And I want to help people. I want them to see their full potential, and be that person to help them get there.
yeah, no, that's an exciting vision. And you were at Nifty Gateway, but I mean, when we met, you have been working at Foundation, I
Yes.
think for over a year.
Yep.
And I know you were working with many artists. You were working on many releases. You were also showcasing the new features of the marketplace, doing partnerships there, right? Can you
Yes.
tell us a bit about your time at Foundation and yeah, all those initiatives that you were part of?
Yeah, so I transitioned over to Foundation. I believe it was 2022.
Hmm.
I think it was like around August 2022. So my focus went from, collections at Nifty Gateway, external collections, and working and sort of being, helping them with onboarding to Foundation, where I was the partnerships manager, and my focus was artists, artist relations, working with artists to collaborate and do releases, meaningful releases that were happening, and making sure that those were happening on Foundation. On top of that, I was also, just providing daily support, to artists that were doing releases on Nifty Gateway, and had any issues. And then there was the other, sort of aspect of that, working with relationships. Sorry, working with artists and working with collectors and connecting the dots
Hmm.
between both sides. So that's sort of where I develop that aspect of, collectors outreach, speaking and working with the collectors and adding value there for the artists that we were working with on a platform. And then, we'll go a little bit further down and how that's developed into my current role now.
Hmm. Yeah. So right now, Rob, I know you are collaborating with MakersPlace, which is another marketplace which has been around for many years. And so you basically have been in three marketplaces that we could say are kind of the pillars, right? They are pioneering many things, right? In the digital art
Yeah.
space. So
Yeah.
how is your role now in MakersPlace?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by saying this. When I started working in Web3, my goal was that I was at one place for a very long time.
Yeah.
It was never my goal to work for multiple marketplaces, especially coming from the football world, because sports it can be a yearly gig. And so I actually moved 3 years, 3 times in 3 years, working college sports. So I was looking for that, consistency in one place when working in Web3. Obviously, life had different plans for me, but it's been great to have that experience. So now at Maker's Place, my role is focused on collectors and private sales and private work placements, in addition to also working with artists and advising them and trying to set up releases that are happening on the marketplace. So again, it's just like a culmination of sort of my the different roles and experience that I've gained working for multiple marketplaces, Now it's just another extension of that and furthering that experience, and it's been great. The Makers Place team is awesome, and it blows my mind how much trad art experience they have.
Mm.
It's over 25 years of trad art experience between working at agencies, art advisors,
Yeah.
auction house, gallery. Like there's a ton of experience at Makerspace, and it's a great team. They've allowed me to be me, which is
Mm.
very important, and they truly care about art and artists and presenting the work in the best way possible. So it's been great, being here.
Awesome. Yeah, I had the chance to meet the team in Basel, and I agree that they were clearly experts when it came to the traditional art world, right? They really understood how traditional art worked, and then they are trying to kind of shake things off a little bit in this new digital art space, right? But they have a clear focus on traditional art and building the relations with collectors, which I found very interesting. Um, so, Rob, what's challenging? I mean, from your whole journey, you describe these three marketplaces, your different roles, how you entered the space. What is unique and also what is challenging in your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think while rewarding um, the role of advisor or working with the different marketplaces, working with, curators, collectors, and creators, it's a constant balance of navigating, like complex, relationships and diverse expectations. It's not just about facilitating, transactions, but fostering trust,
Hmm.
driving meaningful connections, and advocating for a more, healthier, sustainable ecosystem for everyone to be able to thrive in. And so every day you're constantly, walking that fine line of all those sort of factors. And of course, whenever you're dealing with people, there's different personalities, sort of different environments, different ways and different expectations that people have. So it's a constant balance of that every
Yeah.
day, and being sensitive towards them and their needs. It's important.
You're kind of an intermediary, right,
Yeah,
between artists and collectors, and try to keep everybody happy.
right,
Uh, but that's challenging, right? Things have changed over the years, right? We went through a market that was really hot. There were maybe even hundreds or thousands of
right,
pieces being released per day at one
right.
point, and now we are. I mean, things seems to be heating up again, but I
Mhm.
think the past year or two we've seen more exclusive, right? Something more
Right,
where exclusivity, collectors are looking for that exclusivity. Also,
right.
artists with their let's call it sizing of how much art they are releasing. How is it today, Rob? Are you focusing more on one-on-one relations with collectors and artists? Are you doing it at big scale? How many like artists and collectors are you in touch with? Let's say on a monthly basis. I don't know if you have thought about that.
Yeah, that's a little hard to quantify. What I'll say this, the market sentiment within the last, I would say, yeah, 2 months has definitely been trending upwards
Hmm.
a lot of positive sentiment. You're seeing more, focus and sales on art, which I think it's important. Um, but I do think that you've also seen a different intentionality from artists, which I appreciate because 2021 was like the wild, wild west. I mean,
Hmm.
if you had any, I don't know, any potential, any if even if you said you were an artist and you released something and a couple of people knew you were selling,
Yeah.
and so there wasn't an initial filter. I felt like at that point, collectors were FOMOing into buying, and then they did their research.
Mm.
And then 2022, slowed things down a lot in 2023. And so people had to be more intentional about the way that they were collecting. So they were doing research first and then buying. And I feel like we're still going through that where people are being a little bit more intentional. I feel like the projects feel more meaningful too. Um, the artists that are doing successful releases, they end up being, a collective body of work that has a narrative surrounding the collection. There's video production, there's, marketing production, and I just feel like we've definitely improved on sort of that end of things. But yeah, it's been a positive sentiment. And I'm in constant conversation with both artists and collectors daily, and that's one of the most fun parts of my job.
What's your advice in the current state of things for artists? What are things that you think artists are doing that maybe they should do differently? Any common advice you give them in your conversations?
You know, different artists have different needs. So there's not like a general piece of advice that I give artists. Advice that I do give artists that are, beginning or starting out is to a couple of things. Number one, manage expectations. That's one of the things that I learned early on at Nifty Gateway. Those artists and collectors alike who manage their expectations have a higher chance of longevity within Web3. I think that is so important because in 2021 it created a lot of false expectations of what could be. An artist quit their job, they risked a lot,
Mm.
and then ended up with minimal of that in 2022 and 2023 because they over leveraged themselves. So number one, manage expectations. Number two, I would say find your niche. Find what feels most authentic to you as an artist and own it. Authenticity, creates lasting connections and will help set you apart from the rest of the pack. One of the things that I like to tell artists is, um, you know, when it comes to marketing, artists feels like they have to be gimmicky, and they don't. Just be yourself.
Mm.
Be yourself and show who you are. We each have a unique story that's unique to us,
Yeah.
you know? And I think if you just tell your story, if you sort of share your perspective from your vantage point, then that it's enough to set you apart from someone else. You don't have to be gimmicky in your marketing. Just be authentic. Just be yourself. Share things that are authentic, that speak to you, that show who you are as a person. The last piece of advice I would give is also just find your tribe.
Mm.
I think meeting as many people within a space as possible, diving into different communities. Web3 can be very nosy, like noisy. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of sentiment shifts daily, and depending on how you handle that, it can be very taxing.
Yeah.
For some artists, and we've seen posts of artists wanting to leave or have left the space because it can be a lot to bear. So I think finding a group of people, of artists or others within the space that you can sort of, rely on to like ride out the waves of the space is really helpful. And it also just makes the time more worthwhile.
Mm.
And you'll sort of be here a lot longer if you do have sort of like your tribe, your people that you can utilize as a support system. So that would probably be like the three main points
Yeah.
or feedback I would give to artists at the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Um, that I think could be really helpful for the longevity of that artist in Web3.
Yeah, no, you describe. I mean, I think those 3 points are perfect. Number one, managing expectations. I think that applies to everybody
Yes.
in the crypto space, right? Even creators, could be founders, could be collectors. Things change so quickly, and you really need to have your feet in the ground, right? You need
Yes.
to play the long game, because
Mhm.
it's also possible you find success, right? And a lot of success, but it can all slow down from one month to another, and then
Yes.
you want to continue and be here for a couple of years. You really need to find, you said, your tribe. You need to have
Yes.
fun, and so I think that's great. And
Yeah.
what about the collectors, Rob? Because we
Yeah.
talk a lot about artists, right? But on the other side, collectors. What sort of conversations are you usually discussing with collectors when it
Yeah.
comes to expectations?
Yeah, for collectors, I think the number one thing is just to educate yourself. I think it's important to educate yourself, on the tech, different token standards, different features that are out there. Educate yourself on the marketplaces.
Mm.
Educate yourself on the communities because I feel like it helps manage expectation. It also helps you make sense of the landscape of Web3, and it helps you build taste as well.
Yeah.
After educating yourself, I think it's important to build relationships, connecting with other collectors, connecting with artists and other fellow community members. I think it's mutually beneficial, because you have conversation, you have shared experiences, tips are shared between collectors and between people within the space. And again, that also creates sort of a sense of, support system, and it
Mm.
makes it much more so than just the floor, than just the numbers, than just the sales.
Yeah.
Um, and so the last thing I would say is just like be curious. I think if you just explore all the different pockets within Web3 to sort of understand the different corners of the space, over time you'll find out which is the most meaningful to you, and then you can sort of become a steward of it.
Yeah.
Many times, you'll see people that they're like maxis for certain things within the
Yeah.
space, and then they change their outlook on it because they see that other people are having fun within that space, and they want to be a part of it. So yeah, be curious, keep an open mind, And I think that'll also help with longevity.
Maxis, you mentioned Maxis. I feel like I think if you believe in something and you truly believe that's the best that's happening and people should be paying attention to, yeah, you should talk loudly about that. The problem I feel like is that in the space with collecting or basically everything is can be converted to money, right? And then when you are a maxi because you hold something or because you are invested on that, so like after some time people understand that's the reason why you are such proud about something, and it could be the worst that can happen to some people, right? In terms of private sales, I know that I've seen some of your tweets about private sales. I think you have helped many people convert private sales,
Mhm.
and it's something that's trending up. Coming from different marketplaces, when you work at Nifty Gateway Foundation, I think the business models from those marketplaces was different, right? They wanted to have the sales done in their platform. That's what I
Yeah.
think because of the fees, but also private sales can have some advantages. So can you tell us your experience, being kind of a broker of private sales, and what are some of the pros and cons of that way of dealing with art?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every platform that I've been at, that sort of has been a natural progression of the relationship building part of the role. And even when I was at Nifty Gateway, Nifty Gateway had a private sort of sales team. I don't think that was necessarily the title of it, but they had a private sales team, and some of the works were pre-sold ahead of releases.
Mm,
And at that point in time, I never really understood sort of like that concept, as you said, because people want things to be public and want it to be on chain. And not saying that wasn't the case at FT Gateway, that information ultimately is publicized. Um, but yeah, I didn't see it as such a big deal that then I went to Foundation, and it was something that I did on my own to like help the artists. I felt like that's how I could add value to the artists that we were working with, making
mm,
sure that any and everyone, um, knew about upcoming releases that they were doing. That's a service, that's a
yeah.
benefit of working with us, opposed to them working with someone else. And then after Foundation, I sort of created Liaison and was brokering private sales.
Mm-hmm.
At that point of time in the market, things were a lot slower. Sometimes collectors wanted to get liquid and they wanted to move different pieces and move in and out of positions, but they didn't want to be so public about it. And sometimes it was a little bit less than what they pay for, and they didn't want to hurt the artist market. And so doing it through a credible third party just made the process a lot easier.
Okay.
And so that's like where I stepped in and helped facilitate those sales. One of the things that for me that I stood up for was making sure that artists receive royalties. And I think that's one of the benefits of private sales if done correctly. You can ensure that artists are receiving royalties as part of the process. Of
Mm,
course, everyone works differently, but for me, that's something that I always tried to make sure that I did. It's make sure that artists receive royalties from those transactions. And then now at MakersPlace, it's a crucial part of my role.
yeah.
Private work placements. We have a concierge team as well, which is myself and Kat. Kat is leading sort of the concierge team where we go a step beyond. It's more one-on-one personal relationship with collectors. We do video meetings. We do proxy bidding too for like Sotheby's
Mm,
and some of the other sort of like auction houses that have sales online. We do private work placements as well. We do advising on acquisitions. So that's all part of sort of the program. And again, it seems to be a progression of the different roles that I've been at. But it just seems very natural.
mhm,
For most pieces and most sales, it may not make sense, but sort of for the higher end, especially when multiple parties are involved that don't necessarily know each other, having that credible third party definitely helps. And then for artists that we're working with, having works placed privately before the exhibition goes live, it's a
mm,
huge value add. So it's something that, yeah, it's been great being a part of, and I love the relationship building aspect of it and working with both collectors and advisor. But most importantly, I love when it's a win-win situation all around for both sides.
No, that makes sense. There are definitely pros and cons,
Right, right.
and when you mention, so when you work with collectors these days, I'm curious, what are you seeing more of? Are you seeing more of collectors wanting advice on what should we collect? What artists, what pieces, will be culturally valuable in the future? What's a good investment? Or are they looking for you more as a role of facilitator? Like, I know what I want.
Right.
I just need the help to get access to those pieces. So
Yeah.
is it 50-50, or are you seeing more of one or the other?
Yeah, it's a healthy balance of all, to be honest. And a lot of the collectors that we deal with, they're very smart people. They're
Mhm.
very savvy. They don't necessarily need us to sell them on the work. What they need us for is to provide that additional context,
Mhm.
to make it make sense, or just provide additional context in general,
Mhm.
so that for them they can do the additional research and the purchase just makes sense for them. Or they need us just to be the facilitator, as well. But I wouldn't say, it's not necessarily, what can I buy from this specific artist? Like I said, a lot of the collectors, especially within Web3, are very savvy and they can do the research.
Yeah.
We're just sort of playing that facilitator role, providing any additional, context, putting them in direct contact with artists as well,
Yeah.
and furthering or beginning that relationship and furthering that relationship even further beyond that. It's sort of the role that we're playing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Rob, have you been through the years in a spot when you tell a collector, look, this is not a good time to buy this piece. The price is not right. This is so kind of advising them to not do the deal. Have you been at that spot before?
That's a great question. I think, for me, I'm always going to be upfront and honest.
Mm.
Uh, with the collectors that I work with. Again, I don't try to sell them on anything. I just give them my honest feedback, and then it's up to them to make the decision. If I feel, there could be a better price for a piece, or holding off could probably fare well for the
Yeah.
collector, then I'll make sure to share that. And recently I have shared that, specifically with like Chromie Squiggles.
Mm.
Um, right now the market is hot. Like there's just a lot of different collections that have gone up like 30, 40%, even higher than that people are FOMOing into. And then like 6, 8 months ago, no one was looking at those collections.
Yeah.
So it depends on the specific collector. If it's someone that doesn't necessarily care about paying the premium now,
Mm.
because they just want to be a part of it, in comparison to someone who's a little bit more flexible and patient and can wait for a time that works for them. Either way, I'll share my sort of sentiment of what's happening and leave it up to them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the relationship that I like to have. Again, never selling, just giving my sort of expert experience of what's happening, how I'm seeing the market, and then just allowing them to make the decision on their own.
Yeah, that's how you build a reputation and relation over time, right? That's how they keep trusting you over the years. Um,
Right, right.
So, Rob, this is a very straight question. What are some of the collection or artists that you think are in the edge of breaking out? This artist or these collections. You think it's a time to not sure if buying, but you think will have their time soon. You have
Mhm.
to share a few of those. Which ones are in your mind?
Yeah, I'll give you the diplomatic response. Like I said, like I just feel like everything has been trending, upwards in the last 2 months or so. So I think it's making it harder for a seasoned collector to find valuable collections.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. Like people are excited. So they're FOMOing into purchasing things, like I said, that months ago they were like 50, 60% off. So everything looks much better, as they say, when the prices go up. What I can say is that monitoring the market and realizing which collections had a steady sort of volume and traction, and then seeing which have gone up, a higher amount gives you sort of an idea of where the value is being transferred to, and utilizing it that way, to sort of gauge which collection might interest you, if that's sort of like your thesis, right? Because everyone has different thesis of how they collect.
Mm-hmm.
So just use the current market sentiment as like to gauge the temperature on maybe collections and collection art that you wanted to collect in the past. But I won't call out specific collections. Artists, I just truly believe like outside of the circle of repeating names, every other artist deserves more attention.
Mm,
I think 2022 we saw a good, I saw like a really good transition of artists from maybe lesser known emerging artists to like emerging and a little bit more notable. I feel like it's been extremely hard within the last year and a half for artists to transition from sort of lesser known emerging to like a more notable artist in the
mm,
space. And the reason being is that collectors, who in 2021 and 2022 would purchase from those emerging artists because they didn't want to miss out, they're now looking to collect. They know that they can collect the works of notable artists
mm.
for 50% less than they would have then. So that one ETH that they could have spent on an emerging artist, they're easily spending that on a notable artist. And we saw a lot of that last year. So what happened was it made it extremely harder for artists to be recognized and for collectors to take more chances
Yeah.
on those emerging artists. So you were seeing less of that sort of conversion or transition from lesser known emerging to notable artists.
Yeah.
So yes, I just feel like outside of that circle of artists, every other artist deserves more recognition. I would like to see more of the transition, from lesser known artists to notable artists.
You described in terms, Rob, of the kinds or the types. There are so many, different styles and tools and techniques. Anything that is kind of trending up among the circle of collectors that are more interested in kind of draws your attention to anything in particular, or is it all more like equally trending up?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a sort of category that's been leading a lot of the conversation and collectors have been more interested in, and that would be AI art. I remember last year I felt like it was generative art, and then
Mhm.
before that it was like a mix of all with a lot of interest in like glitch art. But I would say for this year, it has been particularly AI art, with a couple of generative art releases and then everything else in between. And rightfully so, right? Like there's been a ton of conversation about AI art and the ethics behind AI art
Mm,
and sort of the human touch and involvement. So it's been a topic of discussion all around, the entire year. And then just the development of AI itself in our daily workflow, in our daily lives. So yeah, it's been something that's been top of mind. And so collectors who are savvy, want to collect AI art from artists who are doing, in an intentional way.
yeah.
So yeah, AI art has been leading a lot of the conversations, and I was at the Christie's Art and Tech Summit earlier this year, and then for those that participated and attended, they gave away nice antes, like pieces for those. It was like I forget, I think maybe like 84 were claimed
Mm,
from attendees.
wow.
Yeah, so they commissioned nice antiques to do a unique work, series for the participants. The first time they did it was the Lost Robbies. So it's just kind of goes to show where the conversation is, where the interest is,
Yeah.
at least on that end.
Rob, two final questions that
Mhm.
I think are very, very interesting to hear from you is three collectors. I usually ask guests to name three artists, but I think in your case, I would like to hear three collectors or three collections, that you think people should pay attention to.
Yeah, so I'll speak on the collectors end. It's hard for me to sort of choose three out of respect for all of the relationships that I have as well with many collectors in this space. So what I'll do is this: I'll shout out a couple of them.
Yeah. Yep.
One of the first is Flannel Capital. Like I remember Flannel Capital was someone that during my time at like Foundation, even when I was at Nifty Gateway, they would consistently, collect things from artists who I wasn't aware of, and I used to get upset because I pride myself at that point in time of having, up to date knowledge of everything that was happening. And once or twice here and there, like Flannel will collect from an artist whose work immediately I gravitated to and I really loved,
Mhm.
and I didn't know who they were. So Flannel always kept me on the edge, and I absolutely love that. I've expressed that to them, and since then they've kind of taken a seat back from being so public. They're still collecting here and there. So Flannel Capital, most recently Luchador, um, is one sort of someone that I've grown to be close with and who I, really respect for how intentional they are in how they collect, and they really consider how each piece speaks to their overall collection but also to other works that they're purchasing, and they're very intentional about that. They're also a big advocate for the artists that they purchase from. I've seen them recently just do Twitter threads on a piece that they've collected, and I appreciate that. Some others that I like to shout out, like Blondie, Scrappy T, Audrey Cricket West, Redbeard, the patron himself. I mean, Redbeard has done so much for so many people. He doesn't necessarily, always speak on this. Quick little story about Redbeard, by the way. I was at the Punks event,
Mhm.
Miami at Art Basel, hanging out with Adam from OpenSea, Lean from Rarible. We were all hanging out in front of the, sort of the event space there. Redbeard, kind of just casually walks out, says hi to us. Adam says to him, like, "Hey, how many Punks books do you have? You probably have a ton of them." He's like, "Yeah, I have a whole bunch of them." And he had sort of like a fanny pack with not a fanny pack, like a duffel bag, and he had one of the books in there. So he goes, "Which one of you guys just wants this?" And I was like, "I'll take it." So he gives me the Punks book. I wanted one of them. I actually came late to the event, so I didn't get one. And he goes, Jack Butcher signed it. I'm like, I love Jack Butcher, by the way,
Yeah.
as a person. This dude is like one of the most honest and raw people you can meet in Web3. So I spent like the next 3 days trying to find a signature, and I couldn't find it. So I reached out to Jack. There's a Salvador Mundi picture within the book where they talk about being one of the highest like value sales, um, and he signs it. So I spent like 3 days trying to look for it, couldn't find where it was, and he like signed it on there. But Redbeard gave me the book, and he just walked away just like that. That just kind of speaks to the person that he is. Just a few others. Delronde, Seed Phrase. I think we're gonna look back in like 20 years, and he's gonna have one of the best collections in Web3. And
Mhm.
and when he buys, I noticed that he buys vertically. Like he'll buy from a certain artist and buy like 4 or 5 pieces. We recently did a release for Photo Paris, a curation, and he purchased 6 of David Young's artworks. And he's a pioneer in like AI art. And so again, Seed Phrase is just one of those collectors that is very intentional, and has been doing so for some time. Prabal, Frail, Batsup Yum, Lynette Bennett Grant, Savis Scrimto, Zach from Super Rare.
Mhm.
I think his collection, he's not very public about it all of the time, but collectively over time, we're going to look back. He's one of those that his collection is going to speak for itself. 33, Provin is another one. So yeah, those are just folks that I've grown, to know,
Mhm.
and converse all the time with, and I respect them for their intentionality and the way that they collect, and not just collecting, just for the sake of
Yeah.
doing so. So I wholeheartedly respect them.
Amazing. That's an amazing list. I'll make sure to include it in the show notes so listeners can get a look at those collections. Rob, it's been amazing. Thanks so much for sharing your journey and all the knowledge. I think it was very interesting conversation. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let's stay in touch and see what the future holds for the space. I think it's heating up. Everything is heating up.
Yes.
And thanks for the job you're doing. And once again for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I greatly appreciate you. I think what you're doing is equally important, for our space to, to speak to people and document it in a video format. It's a huge resource, to people in general within Web3 and outside of Web3 to be able to come back to the content you're providing. So you're doing, your part as well to move the space forward. And I greatly appreciate that. And I greatly appreciate you,
Thank
for
you.
considering me being a guest.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thanks so much. And take care.
Have a good one. Bye.